In the heart of Arizona, billionaire ranch owner William Carter lived a life shaped by success, routine, and silent loneliness. His ranch stretched across thousands of acres, red soil, rolling sagebrush, and rugged mountains like iron walls on the horizon. William liked the quiet. It helped him forget how empty the mansion felt after his divorce and his parents' passing. Yet despite his wealth, despite owning half the county, nothing prepared him for what he would face that blistering afternoon. As he drove down a lonely dirt path, the sun sinking like molten metal, he noticed something unusual near an abandoned, sun-baked gas station. At first, he thought it was a bundle of clothes or trash tossed beside the rusted pumps. But then the small figure moved. William hit the brakes, his heartbeat suddenly sharp in his chest. Dust rose around his truck as he stepped out, squinting through the blinding heat. What he saw froze him. A little Apache boy, thin as a branch, clothes torn, skin streaked with dirt, sat curled against the wall. His small shoulders trembled with exhaustion, and his dark eyes looked up with a mixture of fear and desperation. William felt something shift inside him. He approached slowly, not wanting to startle the child. "Hey buddy, are you okay?" he said softly, lowering himself to eye level. The boy didn't speak. His lips were cracked, his breath weak. Instead, he lifted a shaky hand and pointed toward his stomach. That single movement told William everything: hunger, dehydration, hours under the brutal desert sun. William reached out, his voice gentle. "It's all right. I've got you." Carefully, he lifted the boy into his arms. The child weighed almost nothing, far too light for his age. William felt a tightness in his chest, a rising worry he wasn't accustomed to. He carried the boy to his truck, laid him in the passenger seat, and turned the AC to the lowest setting possible. Then he grabbed a cold bottle of water from the cooler and helped the boy take small sips, careful not to give too much at once. The boy's eyes blinked slowly, still wary, still trembling. William drove fast. Faster than he had ever driven on the dusty roads back to his ranch. The moment he reached home, he called his private doctor, his voice shaking with urgency. The doctor arrived within minutes, examining the child while William paced helplessly behind them. All night, William stayed beside the boy, watching over him as he slept on a clean bed in the guest room. The child would occasionally whimper or twitch, as though fighting off nightmares only he could see. William pulled up a chair and remained there for hours, unable to leave. There was something about the boy's fragile state that stirred a deep sense of responsibility in him, something he hadn't felt in years. When the doctor finally left, assuring him the boy would recover with rest and nourishment, William felt relief but also a lingering dread, as if a bigger truth was waiting just out of sight. The next morning, William contacted the local authorities and nearby communities, determined to find out who the child was. He expected confusion, maybe questions, but when an officer from the Apache reservation arrived and recognized the boy, everything changed. The child, whose name was Noden, had gone missing 4 days earlier. Search teams had been looking for him tirelessly, but the desert was vast, unforgiving. No one knew how he survived so long without water or shelter. As the officer spoke, William felt his chest grow heavy. His hands trembled. The room felt smaller, the air thicker. He tried to steady himself but couldn't. The realization that the child had been lost on his land, his thousands of acres, his responsibility, hit him harder than he expected. That land, so immense and wild, had nearly swallowed the boy alive. As the weight of it sank in, William's knees buckled. He collapsed to the floor, powerless against the emotional blow. The officer rushed toward him, but William waved him off weakly. "I should have seen him sooner," he whispered, his voice cracking. Guilt washed over him like a heavy storm. All the wealth, all the influence he had, yet he'd failed to protect a child who had wandered into his domain. The officer reassured him that no one blamed him, that the desert itself was to blame, but William couldn't shake the feeling. Later, as he sat beside Noden, watching the small rise and fall of his chest as he slept, William made a quiet promise to himself. He would keep the boy safe until his family arrived. He would make sure he was fed, cared for, and healed. He would not let fear or guilt cloud the compassion growing inside him. He touched the blanket gently tucked around Noden, noticing the boy had curled toward his warmth during the night, as if sensing the safety William offered. Time moved slowly over the next couple of days. William stayed hands-on in the boys' recovery, preparing soups, adjusting the room temperature, even reading children's stories in a soft, hesitant voice. Sometimes Noden would open his eyes and watch him silently, his expression unreadable. Other times, the boy would flinch at sudden noises, revealing the trauma he carried. It was during one of those quiet moments that Noden finally whispered his first word to William: "Thank you." The whisper was fragile, but it struck William with the force of a gale. It was the first time he'd heard the boy speak at all. As Noden grew stronger, he explored the ranch slowly, staying close to William like a shadow. He seemed fascinated by the horses, by the open skies, by the gentle way William handled the animals. The boy began smiling. Small, cautious smiles, but real ones nonetheless. William found himself smiling back more often than he had in years. There was something healing about the presence of this small, resilient child. Something that cracked open the loneliness he'd buried deep inside. William had rescued him physically, but it felt like Noden was rescuing him emotionally, piece by piece, without even knowing it. 4 days after the rescue, just as the sun began to sink behind the Arizona mountains, William heard footsteps outside his oak door. Firm, deliberate, purposeful. He opened the door, and there, standing in a quiet line, were 3 Apache women. Their expressions carried dignity, strength, and a deep, calm understanding. Noden stood behind them, his face clean, his eyes bright. The women had come to take him home. But more than that, they had come to acknowledge what William had done. The eldest woman stepped forward, speaking with a gentle firmness. "You saved one of our own," she said. "We have come to thank you." William stood speechless, unsure how to respond. He expected anger, blame, accusations for the days the boy had been missing. Instead, he found gratitude. Another woman stepped forward, holding a beautifully woven blanket decorated with traditional Apache symbols. She placed it in William's hands. "Our people do not forget kindness," she said softly. "This is for your heart, which opened to a child in need." William felt emotion rising again. This time not guilt, but something warm, humbling. Noden stepped forward, wrapped his small arms around William's waist, and pressed his forehead against him. It was a silent thank you, deeper than words. William knelt and hugged him back, feeling the small heartbeat against his chest. For a moment, the world around them faded. The desert wind, the setting sun, the long shadows stretching across the porch. All that existed was a bond formed in crisis, strengthened in kindness. As the women guided Noden toward their vehicle, the boy looked back one last time. His smile was soft but full of trust. William raised a hand in farewell, knowing this moment would stay with him forever. He watched until their car disappeared down the dusty road. Only then did he step back inside, the woven blanket held close. When the door closed behind him. 4 days later, the Arizona sunset painted long streaks of gold and crimson across the sky, casting a warm glow over William's ranch. The desert breeze moved gently through the tall grass, carrying the scent of sage and cooling earth. Inside the mansion, William was finishing paperwork at his desk, though his mind drifted repeatedly to the little Apache boy he had grown unexpectedly attached to. Just as he leaned back, he heard something. Soft footsteps approaching his oak door. It wasn't the heavy stride of ranch workers or the creak of wind. These steps were deliberate, respectful, almost ceremonial. Curious, William walked to the door and pulled it open. Standing on the porch were 3 Apache women, each dressed in graceful traditional clothing, their expressions calm, steady, and rooted in something ancient and powerful. Behind them stood Noden, the rescued boy, looking healthier, cleaner, and shyly radiant. William froze for a moment, unsure of how to respond. He felt the world around him quiet. The sight of them felt like a moment pulled from history, a moment that demanded reverence. The eldest woman, her braids streaked with silver, stepped forward with a quiet strength. "You saved one of our own," she said, her voice deep with sincerity. Her words rolled out with the weight of tradition, as though she spoke not only for herself but for generations before her. "We came to thank you, and to repay a debt our people never forget." William blinked, stunned. He had spent days preparing for responsibility and probably anger, believing the boy's family would demand answers for how Noden ended up lost on his land. But there was no accusation in her voice. No bitterness. Only gratitude and an unspoken understanding far deeper than he expected. Before William could speak, another woman stepped forward. She carried a hand-woven blanket, rich with colors, patterns, and symbols of protection and honor. The craftsmanship was stunning, each thread telling a story. She held it out to him with both hands. "This is for you," she said softly. "For opening your home, and your heart." William reached out slowly, unsure he deserved such a gift. When his fingers brushed the fabric, he felt an unexpected emotion rise in his chest. Something warm, heavy, and humbling. He nodded, unable to force out words that matched the moment. Then, something unexpected happened. Something that caught William completely off guard. Noden ran forward with small but determined steps and wrapped his arms tightly around William's leg. The boy held him as if afraid to let go, pressing his face against William's jeans. William froze, overwhelmed. He had rescued the boy, fed him, stayed by his side through the nights. But this gesture, this pure trust, cut deeper than he was prepared for. Carefully, he placed a gentle hand on Noden's back, feeling the small heartbeat against his palm. It struck him how fragile yet resilient the child truly was. For a man who had lived years building walls around his emotions, the moment felt like sunlight cracking through long frozen glass. The Apache women watched silently, their expressions softening. They understood the bond forming right before their eyes, a bond born not from blood but from compassion. William knelt down so he could meet Noden's eyes properly. The boy's shy smile widened, revealing a happiness that had been absent when they first met. William swallowed hard, feeling his heart shift in ways he hadn't expected, in ways he couldn't fully explain even to himself. When Noden finally released him, he stepped back toward the women, still smiling. The eldest woman spoke again, her tone gentle. "He survived because he is strong," she said. "But he lived because of you." William felt those words settle deep within him. He wasn't used to recognition. He wasn't used to emotional praise. His world had long been built on business deals, quiet meals, and long, silent nights in a house far too big for one person. To hear that he had made a real difference, it felt more valuable than any deal he had ever signed. One of the younger women stepped forward and bowed her head slightly. "If your heart ever needs a place to rest," she said, "our people will welcome you." William didn't know what to say. Hospitality wasn't something he expected from a community that owed him nothing. But he understood that this wasn't just courtesy, it was tradition, gratitude, and honor woven into a single promise. He nodded, holding the blanket close to his chest. "Thank you," he finally whispered. The words felt small, but they carried everything he struggled to express. As the women prepared to leave, Noden hesitated. He turned back to William, his small hands fidgeting with the hem of his shirt. Then he stepped forward again, reaching up for a final hug. This time, William didn't hesitate. He lifted the boy gently, holding him close for a long moment. Noden rested his head on William's shoulder, and William felt a pang in his heart, something between affection and aching loss. "You'll be okay," he whispered, his voice thick. "You're safe now." The boy nodded slowly, understanding more through emotion than words. When William placed him back on the ground, Noden clasped his hand briefly before joining the women once more. The eldest woman gave William a look filled with deep gratitude. Without another word, they turned and began walking across the dusty road toward their vehicle. Their silhouettes moved like part of the desert itself, strong, graceful, timeless. William watched, unable to pull his eyes away. The sun dipped lower behind the mountains, painting their figures in warm shades of amber. With each step they took, William felt a strange mixture of pride and emptiness settling inside him. As the women approached their vehicle, Noden looked back and waved. A small, heartfelt gesture that made William's chest tighten again. He raised his own hand in return, forcing a smile he didn't quite feel. He didn't want the boy to see the loneliness creeping back into his eyes. When they finally drove away, dust trailing behind them, William stood motionless on the porch, holding the blanket like something precious. The ranch, once peaceful and predictable, now felt too quiet. Too large. Too empty. He hadn't realized how much life the boy had brought into his home until that moment. Slowly, he stepped back inside, closing the oak door behind him. The blanket draped across his arm felt warm, heavy with meaning. He walked through the living room, past the chair where he had stayed up watching over Noden, past the kitchen where he had warmed soup for the boy, past the hallway where tiny footsteps had echoed during those brief days. Every corner of the home held a memory now. And every memory tugged gently at a part of him he had long neglected. He placed the blanket on the couch and sat beside it, running his fingers across its intricate patterns. The house felt different now, not just quieter, but transformed. It wasn't loneliness this time. It was reflection. It was a new awareness of his own heart, one he had ignored for years. Noden had reminded him of something he didn't know he'd lost: warmth. Connection. The simple purpose of caring for someone. Wealth had given him comfort, but the child had given him meaning. As he sat there, watching the last rays of sunlight fade across his living room floor, William finally understood something he had never grasped in all his years of success. Sometimes, the family you save becomes the family you never knew you needed.